Hello again, everyone. I'm Richard Sher, and it's time to square off. Let's meet this week's square off panel. We have Jimmy Mathis, Andrew Langer, Andrew Frank, and we welcome back to the show. She's been here before. Rabbi Rachel Sabath, Senior Rabbi of Har Sinai Oheb Shalom Congregation here in Baltimore. And Rabbi, thank you for doing the show. We're delighted to see you.
An honor to be here.
Very good. Well, President Trump is receiving most of the credit for what may well be his biggest deal ever. On Wednesday, the president announced that both Israel and Hamas had, quote, signed off on the first phase of a peace plan in Gaza, which includes a ceasefire and a long-awaited hostage exchange. Rabbi, your reaction to what is going on?
Well, first of all, for many, this is the first moment in 2 years that we can breathe, that people can take a breath, and that there is some hope. There's still, of course, enormous skepticism about whether or not and how this ceasefire and hostage and prisoner exchange will actually take place. There is great concern about the health of who we hope are the 20 living hostages. For 730 days, I've been wearing the bracelet with the name of one of them on it, Omri Miran. So our immediate reaction is one of openness and of hope. And of course, it is bittersweet to be freeing terrorists, dozens of terrorists who are responsible for the murder of dozens of Israelis, each one of them. So that is a very bittersweet deal for the people of Israel.
Absolutely.
Well, like everybody said, it's the first phase of this, and it's a very significant weekend. But as far as a foreign policy win goes, this has to be one of the biggest in my lifetime. Donald Trump promised to get this peace plan done when he was on the campaign trail. Before that, he put the embassy in Jerusalem, and I have a lot of Jewish friends. They have felt like the government has turned their back on them and Israel for a long, long time. And politics aside, again, no deal is perfect, but if Israel can get 20 of their hostages back and the ceasefire sticks, this could be a monumental time in peace in the Middle East.
Andy Frank, what's on your mind?
We absolutely should celebrate the end of this brutal war, which was sparked by the horrendous Hamas attack in October of 2 years ago. But I think the ceasefire is a relief for everyone, and of course, the main thing to celebrate today is the safe return of the hostages. But I do think it's important that we not forget the suffering of the Gazan citizens, over 50,000 killed, mostly women and children. I do give President Trump credit. I don't think it represents brilliance on his part. For the last 2 years, the Trump administration supported Netanyahu in just about every way that Israel asked. Netanyahu knew exactly how to play to the president's sort of vulnerabilities by nominating him to be the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. So Israel got the support of the United States during this period. The United States provided unwavering support. And I think today we should be reminded that both sides are celebrating the end of this horrific killing that has occurred over the last couple of years.
All right, Andrew Langer, it's your turn.
Yeah, listen, I think at the end of the day, Israel would have gotten this administration's unwavering support, regardless of whether or not Netanyahu had offered to nominate President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. What this all underscores is a couple of things. Number one, we don't negotiate with our friends for peace. We have to negotiate with our enemies, and any negotiation means that there's going to be give and take, and there's going to be things that we don't like. And obviously, we need to keep our eyes on the rotten eggs being let out of the basket. Watch that basket very carefully. The other part of this is the fact that it shows you when you are consistent in your messaging across the board, you're not sending mixed signals to those you're negotiating with, and you're making it very clear that there is an existential issue on the line here. I'm very non-sympathetic to the the so-called plight of the Gazans. The reality is, the Hamas took advantage of a vulnerable population. At the end of the day, they dug in, harder and firmer than a tick on a hound dog's posterior, and they made it impossible for any kind of action to happen without harming innocent civilians who were there.
I
But
think that there's a distinction there, though.
Well, but I would say make no mistake about it. At the end of the day, if you ask any of the Palestinians living in Gaza what they would do if Israel threw down their arms, the answer would be that they would want to wipe Israel off the map. And to me,
think that's true for all 2 million Gazans? They would all answer the question in that way?
Yes, I think it's true for all 2 million Gazans.
And do you have anything to support that? In fact, the opposite is true. The Gazans wanted peace as well. They were not necessarily supporters of Hamas.
That's what I wanted to distinguish between. Yes, that's so Andrew and Andy, there's a really important distinction here that we're trying to make, which is that there is Hamas, the terrorist military arm of a larger Islamic Brotherhood that's actually threatening the entire Western Hemisphere and democratic countries everywhere. Hamas, being a terrorist military organization, has absolutely massacred thousands of people, thousands of our people, thousands of its own people, because of its methods, because of the horrible, horrible attack on October 7th. The vast number of the Gazans who are suffering are not necessarily members of that terrorist organization. And I, as a rabbi, also speak often about the innocent suffering Gazans. And our tradition teaches us that we have to separate between the two. There are those trying to kill you, and there are those who are not actively trying to kill you. And we have a human, ethical Jewish responsibility to protect them and to seek an end to this war. Israel, more than any other nation in the world in war ever, has been airlifting sick Gazans to hospitals all over the world. They've been feeding sick Gazans. And so getting in its own hospital equipment and Israel's own food supplies. That is unheard of. And yet the Hamas organization must be forced to halt its actions. It obviously is not capable of peacefully even administering the Gaza Strip. I think that experiment since for the last 20 years has obviously failed. Certainly in the last 10 years, it has horrifically failed its people. So I welcome this for the sake of the innocent Gazans as well.
But beyond the members of Hamas who are in Gaza, if you ask your average, everyday Palestinian living in Gaza whether or not they would want to see Israel no longer exist, the vast majority of them, and yes, I'm sure there are some folks who are living in Gaza who would welcome, the so-called two-state solution. But at the end of the day, what they would rather want is a situation in which no Israel exists. And we have to recognize that there are people who want to wipe, and it gets well beyond Hamas, who want to see this nation wiped off the map.
You said that you have no sympathy for the plight of the innocent Gazans, mostly women and children, that were in the way of this war. I understand that Hamas puts themselves in civilian targets, but that doesn't mean that Israel shouldn't perpetrate a war that understands that and tries to be proportionate to its response to the horrific attacks in October.
All right, let's move over to Jimmy.
And I just want to say that during the war, the administration weaponized anti-Semitism, accusations to suppress free speech. They even deported people who had views that supported the Gazans. This is America. People should be able to say what they want. And finally, Trump wants to make himself Gaza's master builder. What is that about? He's too busy running the Kennedy Center. How does he have time? The president who talks about being America first, he now puts himself in charge of running the reconstruction of Gaza, which he's called the Riviera of the Middle East. What is that about?
This just proves the point that no matter what the guy does, he'll never get credit for it. I mean, brings peace to the Middle East, it looks like, and can't get credit for that. And another spoke coming out of the wheel in this whole thing is how Donald Trump has dealt with Iran, because that is a major spoke. Also, a terrorist organization. Obama was giving hundreds of billions of dollars of cash on pallets, flying them in. Terrorist state. instrumental in this whole thing. Talk about the relationship between Donald Trump and Netanyahu. You look at the horrible relationship that America had with Jerusalem, with Israel, between Biden and Bibi, with Obama and Bibi. I mean, this is a major, significant win, and if by chance it sticks, peace in the Middle East is good for the civilians. Also, I mean, this is a massive win.
Rabbi, are you encouraged?
I am encouraged. I don't put any faith in Donald Trump. I think for all the reasons that Andy said, I think we have a fickle person who's out for his own interests. I think the minute that things get complicated, like with Ukraine and Russia, Trump could easily back away. In a way, reaching this moment was the easy part, sitting around a table with people who, had every pressure on them to make this work. The question is what's going to happen down the road, right? When there actually needs to be some new arrangement for Gaza and peace along Israel's borders. What's going to happen when other terrorist arms of the Muslim Brotherhood around the world start attacking other interests of America and of Israel? I think this is very messy. I don't think the Trump administration at present is capable of managing the Middle East. I don't.
Let me jump in here, please. Under the plan conceived by Trump, Israel would maintain an open-ended military presence inside Gaza along its border with Israel. An international force comprised largely of troops from Arab and Muslim countries would be responsible for security.
Right, I'm aware of that, but that's not going to, there's no way that this is going to go off smoothly. I think the plan, and I have the plan in front of me, I think the plan is ideal and idealistic. Other attempts at doing similar things, whether it's with Lebanon or with Gaza in the past, have not gone so smoothly. And no one have examples of that, but I do think that I'm curious to know, my only point was whether or not we should have faith in this administration's capacity to stick with something as it gets complicated.
But this gets to my point.
Donald Trump is
Andy, hold on. Andrew Langer was jumping in there first.
This gets to my question about this, because we all recognize that international relations is a complicated affair. But to say that the Trump administration backs away when things get complicated, I think is a gross misstatement of what's been happening. The reality is Donald Trump came closer to the table on Ukraine and supporting Ukraine, much closer than the Democrats ever were going to give him credit for.
I'm not. You're misconstruing what I was saying.
All right, but you said they can be fickle, and so but the idea is there's a certain degree. I mean, obviously, we need to be able to adapt our tactics and negotiating strategy when things change. As you point out, it is a complicated situation. There are always things. Von Clausewitz called it the fog of war at the end of the day. But the reality is they have pursued these goals with a single-mindedness that nobody gives them credit for, whether it is trying to find a solution in Central Europe or whether or not it is to try to find a solution in the Middle East. They've been at this. And again, not sending mixed messages in the way that Donald Trump's predecessors on both fronts did, whether it was the 8 years of Barack Obama sending mixed messages both in the Middle East and in Central Europe, and then Joe Biden's completely feckless strategy across the globe.
Do you think that Donald Trump is celebrating the release of the hostage today or upset the fact that he didn't get the Peace Prize? I think it's the latter, because it's all about him. This is his, 8th, 10th, 12th peace that he's negotiated? I can't keep track because every time he talks about it, it's another 2. He negotiated peace between countries that are not even at war. This is a man who's waging war in his own country against his own citizens, and meanwhile claiming credit for resolving conflicts around the world.
Which he should get credit for resolving, as he's gotten right. Twice.
I don't think he's resolved anything yet, and I also think
hold it, Andrew. Let the rabbi speak. Go ahead, Rabbi.
I don't think, Andrew. Let me just say, for the sake of peace and for the sake of human life, I hope your optimism about this administration will hold. The other issue at play is, of course, this current Israeli government, which is barely holding together as we speak. And as things continue to get complicated, because it's the Middle East, I can't see how they wouldn't. My concern is that there won't be enough commitment of America to insist that Arab nations insist on their work that will need to happen in terms of that multi-Arab nation commitment. I think at the end of the day, the Trump administration and the Trump family are much more interested in their fiduciary benefits from those Arab countries than they are in peace.
All right, we're going to take a break. Excellent discussion. Rabbi, it really is good to have you here. And you too, Andy, Andrew, and Jimmy. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to hear from the voice of Square Off, who's on a mission to be more successful. Here is Howard Mallison.
Thank you, Richard. The law firm of Barry Glazer specializes in personal injury, medical malpractice, and nursing home neglect. Barry tells it like it is. His creative TV commercials have made him very recognizable because Barry is really getting the most money that he can from insurance companies at more than any other lawyer. Barry and his team, have an in-house doctor and nurse on staff. So give Barry a call before you call the insurance company. Barry gets you the compensation you deserve. He's that good. Give the law firm of Barry Glazer a call at 410-547-8568 and let them know you heard about them on Square Off. You know, with so many cars on the road and distracted drivers everywhere, auto accidents will happen. And you've experienced an accident, the insurance companies cannot tell you where to take your car. That's why more and more drivers are trusting their auto repairs and maintenance to leading edge auto body and mechanical repair. They work on all makes and models and offer free pickup and delivery anywhere in the Baltimore area. So call them at 410-443-6433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in Mount Washington. They make your car look and run like new again. And back to you, Richard.
Howard, thanks. Leading Edge, of course, is unbelievable. You see Jeff Siegel there. Annabelle and I take our cars there, and they are terrific and reasonably priced. Moving on to the federal government, which has been shut down since 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on October 1st, 2025. Roughly 900,000 federal employees are furloughed or required to work without pay. President Trump says he and he alone will decide who does and does not receive back pay. He blames, as you know, all of it, the shutdown and everything else, on the Democrats. Jimmy Mathis.
Yeah, again, I mean, it's been repeated 1,000 times. It's not a government shutdown. 15% of the federal workforce is furloughed. This has been going on. When I was on the radio, we covered this thing every other month. It is ridiculous that this is how we are funding this country. I do disagree with things like air traffic controllers, that those are non-essential employees. This seems like an awful lot of unnecessary pain on the American people. This is no way to run the most powerful economy on the planet. It's unacceptable. And it really has become the new norm. So fast forward a week or two, they'll continue to spend more of our money like they always do, with another 6-month continuing resolution like they always do. And we'll have this conversation in another 6 months like we always do.
Andrew Langer, what?
Well, listen, I think that there's a political miscalculation that's been done here. If it is a political miscalculation on the issue of the OMB floating the idea of not paying furloughed federal workers for their back pay, because I think this hands the Democrats a cudgel that they can use in the media, et cetera. It's bad, and it's bad policy. I mean, the reality is, I appreciate what some members of Congress have said, which is there should be a rule that if the federal government shuts down, then Congress doesn't get paid. That's how you get Congress to the table here. At the end of the day, I thought we were going to have a deal because the Democrats were supposed to be going to a Columbus Day weekend a retreat in the California country. But it looks like that isn't happening. So things are moving. I have a feeling we're going to get a deal in the next week. I think part of this is, as this misstep has happened, again, whether or not it's affirmative to give the Democrats something that they can use to bring Republicans to the table, I think we're going to have a deal in the next week.
Rabbi, you don't get into politics too much, but what are your thoughts about the shutdown and the hundreds of thousands of government workers that are not going to receive paychecks at a time when, yes. Please
I
go
think
on.
it's very disturbing. I have a number of congregants who are now furloughed, people without pay. Obviously, many, many Americans not being able to pay their rent, be able to eat. And these are the people who serve the government. I think that it's demonstrating to all of us the significance of having bipartisan partnerships, of having politicians in Washington, D.C. that can actually stretch their arm across the aisle and reach agreements. I think what's happening now is obviously also indicative of what's happening across our country, more and more division and more suffering of the American people.
Well, we know that air travel is being impacted, flight delays increasing every day to staffing stress among air traffic controllers. I mean, just it's so ridiculous. They're deemed to be essential and must work without pay. The Burbank, California airport, for instance, was shut down the other day for 6 hours because there weren't air traffic controllers on the job. And heaven forbid, you know, one of the towers fails and a plane goes down. Andrew, Andy, Frank.
I think that Trump and his minions should spare us the crocodile tears about the impact on federal workers. Trump has called federal workers crooked and dishonest. Never before have furloughed federal employees been subject to the threat of layoffs. This is entirely political. Further, there's never been a question of whether furloughed federal employees are eligible for back pay. Russell Voigt, who is the head of OMB and also is the architect for Project 2025, he issued a memo that only Congress can approve back pay. This is so rich coming from an administration that treats Congress like a suggestion box with its daily executive orders. It never gives Congress any power except when it needs to be hypocritical and ask Congress to pay furloughed employees. And then there's Elon Musk, who labeled USAID workers criminals. They don't have any regard for federal workers. They're using federal employees as pawns, with Donald Trump, of course, playing chess with him being the king.
Yeah, well, Congress does have power. That's why they gave the House specifically the power of the purse. It's not
Well,
granted.
Trump is doing
It's
everything
not
he can to
granted from
take
the
it.
president of the United States. So, I mean, we can get into civics, at the third grade level here if you want. But I mean,
Focus back.
huh?
Go ahead, Jimmy. No, I just wanted you guys to say
No, I'm just saying. I mean,
on point.
it's yeah. Congress has power. The judiciary has power. We have three co-equal branches of government. There's a reason why the House controls the strings of the purse. Okay, this is also a problem with living way beyond our means for
That's true.
decades
Yeah.
and funding our government through massive omnibus bills that nobody can figure out what the hell they are. So. I mean, I got it. You guys
Jimmy,
don't
I'm
like
not the
Donald
one
Trump.
that needs a
I got
civic
it, but
lesson. I don't need a third grade civic lesson. Your president needs a third grade
All
civic
right,
lesson.
guys.
Okay,
The one that's
but
taking power
let's
away
be
from Congress.
Andy, let's be fair here. The reality is that the power has become increasingly concentrated in the federal executive branch over the last 50 years by every president who's been in power. And frankly, you can make the case, I have made the case, that Donald Trump has tried to move that power back into the legislative branch. And a lot of what they've been doing in terms of the regulatory power is move that power back into the federal legislative branch. But unfortunately, you've got members of Congress who don't want to do their jobs. I would
Andrew,
say
you are gaslighting us and anybody listening here to suggest that this administration wants to move power back to Congress. Are you kidding
not
me?
at all.
Name,
And in fact, I will say,
All right,
name
guys,
one,
listen.
name one power, name one power that this administration has moved from the executive to the legislative branch.
All right,
One.
guys.
every time that the federal government has tried to get Congress to, or every time the executive branch has tried to get Congress to enunciate their ideas on what the powers of the federal executive branch are, that's what they've been doing. When we talk about regulatory reform, as I've talked about this, the size of the regulatory state doubled under the Joe Biden presidency, from $2.25 trillion to $4 trillion. That's a massive expansion of government power.
All right,
Donald Trump has tried to shrink that power.
Andrew,
Sorry, there we go, Richard. I'm sorry.
you're Billy Bustering.
No.
I did want to say that since President Trump took office in January, the state of Maryland has lost more than 15,000 federal jobs. That's the largest decline in the nation. Maryland Governor Wes Moore announced that there will be support and resources available to help meet the needs of federal workers living in Maryland.
what am I missing on this? Does this guy not know that his phone has a calculator on it? He's operating in deficits. He's going to have another. This is the
Jimmy,
whole point. And he's going to have another horrific session coming up. He just doubled taxes and fees and everything he could imagine. And he's acting like he has some rainy day fund that he can redistribute to people that are being furloughed. What am I missing on this?
Rabbi, you're nodding. You have a thought?
I am concerned about the ultimate impact and the capacity of this government to be able to recover these losses, to be able to protect these employees as it spends, of course, millions and millions to send the National Guard needlessly into peaceful cities and peaceful communities where the governors and the mayors are saying, please do not send them. Please do not stir up more and more and more violence.
And what does that have to do? What does that have to do with Governor Moore finding magical money, okay, to subsidize federal workers? What does any of that have to do with what the question was from Richard, which he's promising money that he doesn't have? And by the way, if he's so indignant, okay, about getting extra funds, maybe he should stop poking Donald Trump on a daily basis for no reason.
All right, Jimmy, we're going to pause for a moment, quiet down for a second, go back to Howard Mallison with more good news from our sponsors.
Thank you, Richard. You know, Dr. Kelly Gagan is a well-respected board-certified podiatrist and heel specialist. Foot problems can happen at any age, and Dr. Gagan knows that the appearance of your feet matter just as much as correcting any problem. So if you're experiencing any kind of problem with your feet that keep you from wearing open-toed shoes or sandals, you may be a candidate for laser treatments that can solve the issue. They're safe, painless, and go right to the cause, and you can believe me because I'm a satisfied patient, and so is Richard. So give Dr. Gagan a call at 410-753-4422 to set up an appointment. Baltimore is a great diner town, and Double T diners year after year are voted #1 in reader polls. TT stands for totally terrific. For breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you can't beat the enormous menu selections that will bring you back again and again. There's Double T locations on Route 40 West, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Bel Air, Laurel, Annapolis, Pasadena, and the EC Diner in Ellicott City. Plus, try By the Docks in Middle River for their Monday night lobster special. All part of the Double T family. Tell them you heard about it on Square Off. Back to you, Richard.
Now, this program is being recorded for the entire week. It's Friday, October 10th right now. And who could ever have imagined that after 5 games, the Baltimore Ravens would be 1-4 with their #1 superstar Lamar Jackson out of action with a hamstring. Most of their defensive line was out injured. No pass rush on the O-line. It means no quarterback sacks and not much pass protection for our quarterback. What's going on with our team? Somebody, anybody.
They're hurt. Yeah, it'd be one thing just to lose Lamar Jackson trying to.
I think they need Donald Trump to come in and solve their problems.
All right. Yeah. I you know what? I'll tell you what. I would take Donald Trump over Harbaugh right now. But yeah. Look, again, it's a beat up team. You know, Lamar is obviously a massive loss, and then defense. I think you literally have 1 or 2 starters that are still in the squad. So it's hard at that level to be competitive when you have that many backups. So I think this is one of those years that you write off and get healthy, come back and regroup next year.
Andy, what do you want to say?
I don't know. I don't know a lot about football. I do know that yelling at the TV seems to be a very important part of the game. My solution is that the Ravens need to score more points than the other team. That's all that I can bring to this conversation.
Well, we might,
Andy, like if you look at it, they've actually, again, this was back when Lamar was still playing games they were losing. They were still throwing up like over 40 points.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. They do need more than the other team.
And listen, I think at the end of the
this
day,
bodes well for many other teams.
yeah, but also listen, seasons change. This is why they have the phrase "any given Sunday." And I am an optimist about many things. One of them is about Ravens football. I think this. Listen, we are at the depths of the season right now. I think it can only get better from here on out.
all right. Well, I don't know what to say, Rabbi. We could use a good prayer for a victory over the Los Angeles Rams, but I guess there isn't one in the Bible for that, is there?
There is, which is that may God give great wisdom to human beings, and may God give great wisdom to allow for peace in our country, in our cities, in Israel, for Israel, for innocent Gazans, and throughout the world as we move into this Shabbat of Sukkot, where we are dwelling in our canopies, praying for protection, praying for hope, and praying for peace.
Amen.
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 Jimmy.
I was just going to say,
All
and the meek shall inherit the earth. So maybe the Ravens will win Sunday.
Okay. Listen, this was terrific. Rabbi Sabath, thank you for giving us your time and your wisdom. Good to have you with us. Again, you were on once before. We'll have you on again. Andrew Frank and Jimmy Mathis, Andrew Langer, thank you all so much. Go Ravens. Go Ravens.
And
Thanks,
Shabbat
everybody.
shalom.
Bye,
Look
Richard.
forward to seeing you all next time when once again we square off. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.